I want to bring in my panel. Jeff Jacobowitz is a partner at Arnold Golden Gregory and has experience representing White House employees during Clinton scandals. Maya Wiley is Senior Vice President for Social Justice at the New School and an MSNBC legal analyst. Christine Quinn, Vice Chair of the New York State Democratic Party. Evan Siegfried is a Republican strategist. So let's start with the legal part of this, Jeff. You've been on the inside of these kinds of investigation. Obviously, a very wide net is being cast, gathering a huge amount potentially of evidence, and then determining the direction of the investigation. Do you think that Jerry Nadler is going about this in the right way?
Well, what he's doing is really investigating first. He hasn't come out and said anything about any impeachment proceedings. He's going to gather the evidence, and he's doing exactly what a House Oversight Committee is entitled to do under the Constitution. So he gathers the evidence, and most of these documents have already been turned over either to Mueller or to the Southern District, for example. And so executive privilege will be raised by some people, but most of the people on this list, and it's an extensive list, will have to produce the documents. And even if executive privilege...
So you're pretty confident of that, sounds like, that most of the people will indeed have to cough these up?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, if they don't, there will be subpoenas issued and it will be fought about in court. And executive privilege is really a deliberative privilege, and it is not extensive completely when it involves a criminal investigation.
So, and I think it's worth saying this, we say it every day, but impeachment is a political process, and I want to read what the president tweeted less than an hour ago. Now that they realize the only collusion with Russia was done by crooked Hillary Clinton and the Democrats, Nadler, Schiff, and the Dem heads of the committees have gone stone cold crazy. 81 letters sent to innocent people to harass them. They won't get anything done for our country. Maya, how do Democrats, though, kind of keep this from looking like a fishing expedition?
Well, I think what's interesting here is you can either say it's a fishing expedition, but you can't say that Donald Trump didn't seed the pond. I mean, they have identified areas of investigation in which there's a number of public details and facts that demonstrate it's far from some kind of abuse of their own authority, right? And remember that they're coming out of a Congress in which they were trying to issue subpoenas or ask for witnesses, where when the Republicans were in the majority, they refused. So there's a little bit of a creation of a political problem by the lack of bipartisanship from the previous Congress here, if we're honest. That said, I do think Jerry Nadler is completely within his rights, and there is a legitimate question raised about how do you parse the amount of work across the committees. In other words, so many of these investigations are overlapping. How do you make sure you're doing it in a way that neither interferes with the criminal investigations that are happening outside of Congress, and how you navigate the fact that you have multiple committees that are overlapping in some of the things that they're requesting.
Yeah, and but
that's
also,
legitimate.
If you're looking at, do we have something here that's really an impeachable offense? The second part of that question, Christine Quinn, is can we convince the American people that this is an impeachable offense? And so does this become a question of not just building a case brick by brick by brick, but looking at the public polling?
Well, look, we're in the beginning of this with Chair Nadler and the other committee chairs, as Maya said. So they have cast a net that is appropriately wide to get the information, to see what happened. They are not concluding what the information says before they get it.
But the statements they have made, even as they say, we're not ready to say this is about impeachment, there are some members of Congress who are, but even as they say that, they're saying they're seeing signs that there was criminal behavior.
But they're saying that there are signs to lead them to want more information. And I think it's important because the Democrats who are in leadership and in leadership of these committees have not drawn a conclusion that they're on the road to impeachment. And some of them are getting, political pushback on that from parts of the Democratic Party. But they're appropriately deliberate and going at one step at a time. Other members of Congress have their own opinion, but we're talking about those who will lead the investigations not having taken a position in advance. And that's important because there is political pressure on them. And in the case of Chair Nadler, TV and radio commercials out there trying to push him to get ahead of himself, and he's not yielding to that, which is a demonstration of leadership and sincerity in the process.
Let's talk about some of the specifics because, Evan, we've got the president's two oldest sons, and we know he has drawn a line where his family is concerned, where his personal business is concerned. The committee wants documents related to conversations about Michael Flynn, Sean Spicer's resignation, the president's contact with James Comey, discussions about Jeff Sessions' recusal, but the Trump brothers have never been part of the White House. They run the company. So what do you make of that?
Well, remember when Donald Jr. went to the House Intelligence Committee and he said he couldn't answer a question because of attorney-client privilege, and he claimed that he had the privileged relationship with his father because an attorney was in the room when he had one of these particular conversations? I don't think that'll stand up in court, but I think you're going to see at least Don Jr. and maybe Eric Trump try and resist along the lines and find some sort of, shoot for the moon legal strategy to say, oh, yes, we have executive privilege, too. But at the end of the day, they don't. Ivanka not being subpoenaed was, I think, very smart. I think we're seeing through Chairman Nadler the public relations game, because impeachment at the end of the day is a PR trial.
So as a PR move, why don't you send out a request for documents?
Several of the people
Trump?
who have been subpoenaed will cite executive privilege, and I don't think they will ever have to turn over certain documents. But they will see other people, such as Trump Organization employees, Ronna Graff, Alan Weisselberg, George Packer. They're going to have to turn over documents. There's no way about it. But then it gives Democrats the ability to say on the next public relations front, what are they hiding from the people who are claiming executive privilege? And then once that fight is going through, then they hit Ivanka with the subpoena. That's the big one. Ivanka is, as portrayed through the press, the favorite child, the can do no wrong. She's brilliant. She's amazing. And when you hit Ivanka, then you know it's starting to get serious. It's all about bringing the public along slowly to whether or not they can support impeachment.
So Jeff, when you look at all the layers of this and how extensive it is, how does the White House legal team pivot from dealing with what you could argue is a limited scope in the Mueller investigation to the massive scope of 6 investigations going on all at once? I mean, I know that they've been beefing up their White House staff, but do you need a medium-sized law firm to really get a handle on this? You want to be ahead of it, right?
Well, sure, and they've beefed up and brought on a lot of attorneys to deal with this. But the investigations are not just coming from the Hill. It's coming from the Southern District. It's coming from the New York State Attorney General's office. It's coming from Mueller. And when the White House comes out and says the investigation is crumbling, it's not near crumbling. In fact, these investigations are all live investigations. And the issue will also be, how will the House deal with receiving all these documents? How will they be able to go through it? Because they will have to bulk up in terms of who they will utilize to review the documents.
So we just got a new tweet from the president, which shows you can read the level of how irritated he's getting, right, by the amount that comes out a lot of times. He's calling it now the greatest overreach in the history of our country. Now it's a big, fat fishing expedition desperately in search of a crime, when the fact, of course, as he said many times before, is what the Dems are doing and have.
Fat-shaming an investigation?
Can you do that? Is that?
Well, we say that every day with this president.
Right. So I want to go to, it was a fascinating interview, if you saw it last night on Rachel Maddow with Jerry Nadler. He told that he expects to have the former acting attorney general, Matt Whitaker, back to testify in the next couple of weeks, specifically about allegations the president wanted him to lean on SDNY. How significant is that?
Pretty significant, because again, you're talking about a Congress that has the question about whether you have a sitting president abusing presidential authority. If the president is literally trying to interfere with a legitimate investigation into crimes by instructing his acting attorney general to tell the Southern District what to do and not to do, that is a clear abuse of his power as president, particularly when it's designed to protect his business interests.
We have 30 seconds left. NBC exclusive, revealing last night a $70,000 check, a copy of it, that the president had allegedly promised to Michael Cohen, reimbursement for those hush money payments, and that Cohen got in February of 2017. Does this damage the argument that the president was not personally involved in authorizing these payments?
Of course it does. Of course. I mean, look, that argument was laughable to begin with. with, but you see a check made out to Michael Cohen from the Trump Organization. There is no way that Donald Trump didn't know what was going on.
And he's a micromanager, so he has to have known.
And Don Jr. signed it.
So Mitch McConnell didn't want the president to do this. Lamar Alexander has reportedly been offering up some alternative ways to get this funding recently, and no go. Why do you think, Matt, that the president is so adamant about this?
Well, it's pretty clear that this is the thing he promised his base and that he's going to deliver come hell or high water.
So even if he goes down, he's going to show them, I'll go down fighting.
Well, he's not going to go down. He's going to veto this, and they don't have enough votes to override the veto. So he's going to get this emergency declaration, but it's insane, right? This isn't how emergencies work. You don't declare an emergency and then say it's going to take me 15 years to build a 2,000-mile wall. Like, it's a preposterous thing to do, and also it's a terrible, terrible attack on the Article I powers of Congress, and that's why Mitch McConnell's so upset about this.
Yeah, I mean, if the president, Evan, vetoes, and again, Congress unlikely to overturn that veto, does it actually become a victory for the president? Doesn't look as bad as some people are presenting it.
It's a political victory for the president. And I think the president knew that this would be he would have this declaration filed against him and he would lose that fight, but he would be able to veto it. He's really being able to go out and say to his base, see, I fought for you. I did what was necessary to secure this country because this was the big promise I made in 2016. And if the courts overturn this, which I think they will, then he's going to go out in 2020 and say, if it weren't for those activist judges, the activist judges will be the new boogeymen. And it's all a political strategy. It's not a national security strategy. It's not an emergency. It's all about securing his base and making sure they're with him in 2020.
And yet, Christine, give Rand Paul credit for this much. He said, I can't very well go and say, okay, President Trump, you can overreach when I railed against President Obama all that time. So conversely, Democrats who were supportive of Obama when he did a lot of the executive orders and so on that Republicans said were overreach, can they criticize President Trump now?
Absolutely, because what President Trump is doing now is unheard of, using emergency declaration in this manner. This has never happened before. It's really not comparable, whatever you thought about President Obama's moves, to what he did. And, you know, the idea that this is going to be a political victory, yes, the president's base is going to love it. Right? But that base is not enough to get reelected. And for him to have lost control of his party in the Senate, to have the Senate leader, a Republican, saying, I've tried to convince the president to change his mind, is a sign of weakness on the president's part and a sign of how far out the president is, even from the Republicans who have stood with him.
Let's talk about one of those, Susan Collins, and it goes to your point, Matt, which is she said about her decision, I'm quoting, I truly don't see this as sending a message at all about one way or the other about border security, but rather about executive overreach. And look, if you skim the Federalist Papers, if you know a little something about separation of powers, if you know about the power of the purse and the constitutional authority given to Congress, you can make that argument. But my question is, do the voters care?
They don't care about Article I power, that's for sure. That's an elite argument that's going on. What they do care about is focus on the things that matter to them. And building a gigantic wall isn't going to make their lives better, and they know it. They have had it with a guy that came in promising moon, and, you know, in the old days, the snake oil salesman would get on the train and leave town. This snake oil salesman has had to stick around, and they're beginning to recognize that. So they're not going to get wound up in the things that bother people like us about the Article I power, but they do care that this guy has pushed his entire political stack in for something that doesn't matter to them.
And you know what else they care about is, I believe, are the military projects that will potentially not be funded. They care about national security and America's place in the international world. What projects are those? We don't really know the answer to that question. The new senator from Arizona met with the vice president. She couldn't get answers to those questions. What's the national security impact of canceling those? Or what's the bread and butter impact of not building more barracks or not building a new base? How does that affect the town and its small businesses that thrive off of that?
And the
that's what people care
president's
about.
other promise, he was going to have the best military ever. Evan, we got to talk about the politics of this, and Mitch McConnell's put right in the middle of it. The way that he'll put it is this: Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell needs the support of President Trump and Senator Rand Paul to win re-election next year, meaning he must rely on two men on opposite sides of the debate over the use of an emergency declaration to build a wall. Is this trouble for him? Will the president look at him and say, well, you did the best you can, or he is known to have a long memory?
Mitch McConnell will win re-election with or without Donald Trump. Why? Because Mitch McConnell has the faith of the Kentucky voters, and I think that he is fine there. There are other, however, Republicans who are in a tough position. Cory Gardner right now is undecided on this, and I would say to any Republican who's considering this in the Senate, think of it this way. Principles are only such if you stand by them when it's inconvenient. And you can be tough on immigration. You can be in favor of the wall, but you should also recognize that you can't go about getting it when it's in an unconstitutional manner, and this is that.
We can't say that enough. Principles matter most when it's inconvenient to hold your principles. Tomorrow, the House is going to vote on a resolution to condemn anti-Semitism. Can we all just agree that that's bad? Okay. But this is a direct response to a series of controversial comments made by freshman Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. Most recently, you know this, last week she was speaking at a progressive town hall about Israel, and she told the crowd, quote, "I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country." Well, this comment got widespread backlash, and in a letter to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the CEO of the Anti-Defamation League, Jonathan Greenblatt, called her reference to foreign allegiance a vile anti-Semitic slur. Congresswoman Anita Lowy responded on Twitter, writing in part, "Lawmakers must be able to debate without prejudice or bigotry. I am saddened that Representative Omar continues to mischaracterize support for Israel." Now, while the draft of the Democratic resolution, which was obtained by NBC, does not mention Congresswoman Omar by name, it does spell out the remarks that she has said. Christine and Evan are back with me. So, Christine, the top Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, Steny Hoyer, are behind this resolution. Should the Democrats be doing this?
Absolutely. You know, if somebody speaks out in a way that is anti-Semitic or racist, sexist, homophobic, bigoted or discriminatory in any way, you need to respond to it. As Evan said before, principles only really matter if you use them when they make you uncomfortable, and that would mean against a member of your own party. Now, look, I wish...
A rising star freshman Congresswoman. So the Washington Post columnist, Henry Olsen, argues, in fact, that the Democrats aren't going far enough. Speaker Pelosi and the rest of the leadership need to realize that Omar has become their party's version of Representative Steve King. They must do what Republicans recently did to King, remove Omar from her seat on all House committees. Does he have a point, or is that really a step too far?
No, he has an absolute point. Ilhan Omar has a history of making anti-Semitic statements and putting out anti-Semitic tropes. And she's always said, oh, maybe it's a little bit of naivete, or it's been excused as naivete. After how much naivete do you realize it's not naivete? It's something deeper. She said that Israel has hypnotized the world and is making the world not see their evils. She's gone out and said it's all about the Benjamins. Either repeated anti-Semitic statements made by her. And we have seen on the far left more and more anti-Semitism rising in embrace of anti-Semitic figures. Look at the Women's March leadership. Linda Sarsour, Tamika Mallory, who have gotten in trouble for significant anti-Semitism. They've held up Razmia O'Day, a convicted terrorist.
But let's stick to this. Yeah. But is this a lukewarm response then?
No, I don't think it's a lukewarm response at all. Look, it is very serious that Speaker Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and members of leadership are stepping out criticizing a brand new freshman member. Usually, you know, freshmen get a lot of latitude. She should not be given latitude. I'm not arguing for that. But what they're doing here is very significant and very powerful in sending a message. And, you know, I just wish Republicans were as willing to step up quickly and strongly in the case of what Jim Jordan tweeted, for example, at Jerry Nadler. We would have a more balanced situation.
I want to get to that in a minute, but can we stick to this for just a second? Because the star of this freshman class, AOC, is tweeting repeatedly about this. Here's the first one. It's not my position to tell people how to feel or that their hurt is invalid, but incidents like these do beg the question. Where are the resolutions against homophobic statements, for anti-blackness, for xenophobia, for a member saying he'll send Obama home to Kenya? And then in another tweet she says, don't even get me started on misogyny.
Well, look, this is
where does it start? Where does it end?
Well, look, a number of the questions she asked, which are fair questions about other bigoted ways of being and speaking, a lot of those happened when the Democrats weren't in leadership. Not all, but right now we're seeing Nancy Pelosi's leadership be swift and strong. And I just want to say for the record, we don't have to go into it, I take exception to the comments you made about the Women's March organizers, just for the record.
Well, we won't have to get into that, but I'll disagree with you on that. But I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, well, she's right. Yes, we should not tolerate anti-LGBT statements or any form of bigotry or discrimination. That's a whataboutism, what she just pulled. And whataboutism takes pressure off and deflects from the original offense. And Ilhan Omar has a repeated history of making anti-Semitic statements, and she seems to not care. You saw when she was, after she put out that big apology from the "It's all about the Benjamins baby" tweet, and she got in serious trouble less than a month ago, that she was caught in the halls of Congress and she could not be bothered. She's just chewing gum saying, I put it all in my statement.
All right, well, so let's go now to Jim Jordan. He's facing a backlash of his own after tweeting, quote, Nadler feeling the heat big time, jumps to Tom Steyer with a $, as he asks, conclusion, impeaching our president before first document request. And then Jerry Nadler responded, to be clear, this tweet counts both as inane and anti-Semitic. So Republicans have been very outspoken about Omar's comments about the president, but we haven't heard much about this back and forth, really.
And it's just an example of a double standard. You know, the Republicans are going to criticize Speaker Pelosi for not doing enough, and then when a member of their own party does something anti-Semitic, clearly having caused hurt out there and adding to the what you rightly cited as anti-Semitic rhetoric across the country, you hear just about crickets.
Christine Evan, we are out of time, but would you come back when you have some firm opinions about it? It's great to see you both. Thank you.